The first shot of gunfire shattered the glass before anyone even realized what was happening. It wasn't a warning shot. It was meant to kill. Elena Park dropped the plate in her hand as the explosion echoed through the mansion, shards of porcelain scattering across the marble floor. For a split second, everything froze. The dripping faucet, the hum of the refrigerator, her own breath caught halfway in her chest. Then the second round came. Louder. Closer. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She ducked instinctively, heart slamming against her ribs, eyes darting toward the hallway leading out of the kitchen. Voices. Running footsteps. A shout, cut off abruptly. This wasn't an accident. They were under attack. Elena forced herself to move. Think, she whispered under her breath, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. Think. The front halls would be chaos. The exits would be watched. She had memorized the layout weeks ago, not out of curiosity, but survival. There was a service corridor behind the pantry. Narrow. Hidden. Easy to miss. Another gunshot rang out. Closer. She flinched, then ran. Her shoes barely made a sound against the floor as she slipped past the kitchen doors, into the dimly lit service hallway. The lights flickered once, then steadied, casting long shadows that made every corner feel like a threat. She didn't look back. Couldn't. If she did, she might freeze, and freezing meant dying. She reached the pantry door, pushed it open, and slipped inside, quietly shutting it behind her. The darkness swallowed her immediately. She pressed her back against the door, hand over her mouth, trying to control her breathing. Outside, the mansion was no longer silent. It was alive with violence. Hours earlier, the house had been suffocatingly still. The kind of silence didn't exist in ordinary places. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't calm. It pressed down on you, heavy and deliberate, like it was watching. Elena had noticed it on her first night, the way even the air felt controlled, measured, owned. Before we continue, I would like to thank you all so much for tuning in. We truly appreciate your support. Please and please, hit the subscribe button to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us. God bless you for being a part of our journey. Now at 3:07 a.m., she stood alone in the kitchen, sleeves rolled neatly to her elbows, hands submerged in warm water as she washed the last of the dishes. She worked quietly, efficiently, without hesitation. She always did. It was the only way to survive in a place like this. The mansion, Hanol House, was massive, cold, and immaculate. Everything had its place. Everything was perfect. Except the people. Especially the man who owned it, Kang Min-jae. Even saying his name in her head felt dangerous. Elena had never spoken to him directly. Not once. That was the rule, unspoken but understood. Staff did their jobs. They stayed invisible. They didn't ask questions. And most importantly, they didn't attract his attention. She rinsed a plate, dried it, and placed it carefully on the rack. The rhythm of the task grounded her, gave her something predictable in a place where nothing truly was. Behind her, the faintest shift in the air made her pause. She didn't turn immediately, but she knew. He was there. Elena exhaled slowly, placing the cloth down before turning, just enough to acknowledge his presence without meeting his eyes directly. Kang Min-jae stood at the threshold of the kitchen, dressed in black, his white shirt slightly undone at the collar. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing casual about him. There never was. He didn't speak. He just watched. The silence stretched. Thick. Heavy. Most people would panic under that kind of attention. They'd stutter. Apologize. Try to fill the void. Elena didn't. She turned back to the sink and continued washing. The sound of water filled the space between them. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Still, he didn't leave. Her hands remained steady, but her awareness sharpened. She could feel his gaze. Not intrusive, not aggressive, but deliberate. Studying. Evaluating. It made something uneasy stir in her chest. Finally, she spoke. Not loudly. Not nervously. Just enough to break the silence. You're bleeding. The words hung in the air. For the first time, there was a shift. Not in the room, but in him. She didn't turn around. Didn't need to. She had already seen it earlier, just a glimpse. A dark stain near his side. Subtle, but unmistakable. Still, saying it out loud, that was a risk. Behind her, she heard a faint movement. Fabric shifting. When he spoke, his voice was low. Controlled. You shouldn't be concerned with that. Elena nodded slightly, more to herself than to him, rinsing another dish. I'm not, she replied calmly. It's just noticeable. Another silence. Different this time. Less suffocating. More uncertain. He stepped closer. She could hear it, the quiet, measured sound of his footsteps against the floor. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Intentional. Most people would pretend they didn't see it, he said. Elena dried her hands slowly before turning just enough to face him. Not fully, but enough. Most people here are afraid of you, she said. His expression didn't change. Are you? The question landed heavier than expected. Elena met his gaze for the first time. Not challengingly, not submissively, just honestly. I'm careful, she answered. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not amusement, something quieter, more dangerous. He studied her like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned away. Finish your work, he said, and walked out. From that night on, things changed. Not outwardly. The routine stayed the same. The house remained silent. The rules didn't shift, but the atmosphere did. Min-jae began appearing more often. Always at odd hours. Always when Elena was alone. He never interrupted her work. Never gave unnecessary orders. He just watched. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then she realized it wasn't. One night, as she wiped down the counter, she spoke without looking up. You don't sleep much. A pause. Then his voice from behind her. Neither do you. She allowed a faint, almost invisible smile. I don't have that luxury. And you think I do? She glanced at him briefly. No, she said. I think you don't allow yourself to. That time, he didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. You assume a lot. I observe, she corrected gently. Silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was something else. Something neither of them named. Director Choi noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. You've been distracted, Choi said one evening, standing across from Min-jae in his office. Min-jae didn't look up from the document in his hand. I'm always working. Choi smiled faintly. Not always. That made him pause. Just slightly. Choi continued, his tone calm but edged with warning. The girl in the kitchen. She's been around you more than necessary. Min-jae set the paper down. She does her job. That's not what I asked. Their eyes met. A quiet tension filled the room. Choi stepped closer. Men like us don't get the luxury of attachments. Min-jae's expression hardened. She's not an attachment. Choi studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good, he said. Because people who don't fear you tend to become problems. Min-jae didn't respond. But later that night, at exactly 3:00 a.m., he found himself standing in the kitchen doorway again, watching her. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like something he didn't want to lose. Back in the dark pantry, Elena pressed her ear against the door. The gunfire had slowed, but it hadn't stopped. Her grip tightened around the metal rod she had grabbed from the shelf. Her mind raced. This wasn't random. Someone had planned this. Someone powerful enough to breach the estate, which meant one thing. No one here was safe. Not even him. Her breath caught. Before she could stop herself, the thought slipped through. Is he alive? Another gunshot. Closer. Right outside. She froze. Footsteps approached the door. Heavy. Measured. Then stopped. Silence. A hand touched the handle. Slowly. Deliberately. Elena raised the rod. Her body tense, ready to strike. The door creaked open, and a bloodied figure stepped inside. Her grip tightened, until she saw his face. Kang Min-jae. Alive. Barely. And looking straight at her. Are you hurt? He asked. Not himself. Not the attackers. Her. And in that moment, everything changed. Elena didn't lower the metal rod immediately. Her grip stayed tight, knuckles pale, breath uneven as she stared at him. Blood had soaked through the side of his shirt. Darker now, heavier than before. It wasn't just a wound. It was bad. Still, his eyes weren't on himself. They were on her. I asked you something, Min-jae said, his voice quieter this time, but no less firm. Are you hurt? Elena swallowed, slowly lowering the rod. No, she said. I'm fine. Only then did something in his posture shift. Not relief exactly, but something close to it. Something that loosened the tight control he always carried. He stepped further into the pantry, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The sounds of chaos outside became muffled again, distant but still present. You shouldn't be here, he said. Elena let out a short breath, almost disbelieving. You think I chose this spot for comfort? She replied. For a second, just a second, there was the faintest hint of something in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Then it was gone. You chose correctly, he said instead. This area wasn't part of their entry route. Elena's eyes flicked to the blood again. You need to sit, she said. I'm fine. You're not. The firmness in her voice made him pause. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't fear. It was certainty. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, he listened. He leaned back against the wall, not fully sitting, but enough to take pressure off his side. Elena moved without hesitation, scanning the shelves before grabbing a clean cloth. This will hurt, she said. I've had worse. I don't doubt that. She stepped closer, her movements precise but quick. When she pressed the cloth against his wound, his jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't make a sound. Up close, the reality of it hit harder. This wasn't just a powerful man. This was a man bleeding. Human. Vulnerable. And for the first time since she'd entered this house, Elena felt something shift in herself. Not fear. Something else. Who did this? She asked quietly. Min-jae didn't answer immediately. Someone who thinks chaos is opportunity, he said finally. Elena frowned. That doesn't narrow it down. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Silence settled again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, charged with everything that had just happened. After a moment, Elena spoke again. They knew the layout, she said. The attack was too coordinated. Min-jae looked at her more carefully now. You've been paying attention. I live here, she replied simply. I notice things. That's dangerous. Elena met his gaze. So is being blind. Another pause. Then, quietly, you should leave. The words came out suddenly. Sharp. Unexpected. Elena blinked. What? When this is over, he clarified, pushing himself slightly off the wall. You'll be sent somewhere safe. Away from here. Something in her chest tightened. And you think that solves it? It keeps you alive. For how long? She challenged. If someone is bold enough to attack this place, what makes you think they won't find me elsewhere? His expression hardened. They won't. You don't know that. I do. No, she said, shaking her head slightly. You want to. That landed. Harder than anything else she'd said. Min-jae stepped closer now, despite the blood, despite the pain. I won't argue this, he said, his voice low again. You don't belong in this world. Elena didn't step back. Then why am I still here? The question hung between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. The aftermath of the attack left the mansion quieter than ever. But it wasn't the same silence. This one felt broken. Unstable. The bodies had been cleared. The damage was already being repaired. Orders were being given in hushed tones, movements sharp and efficient. But beneath it all, there was tension. Director Choi stood in the main hall, speaking with two men in low voices. When Min-jae entered, the conversation stopped instantly. Choi turned. His eyes flicked briefly to the bandage at Min-jae's side. You're injured. It's handled. Choi nodded once. The attackers have been identified, he said. A faction from Busan. Smaller group, but clearly ambitious. Ambitious men don't live long, Min-jae replied. No, Choi agreed. They don't. A pause. Then, the girl. Min-jae's gaze sharpened slightly. What about her? Choi's tone remained neutral, but there was something beneath it. She was present during the attack. Yes. And she's still here. Yes. Choi took a step closer. That's a mistake. Min-jae didn't respond immediately. She saw too much, Choi continued. And now she's a vulnerability. If word gets out, it won't. You can't guarantee that. I can. Choi studied him carefully. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, quietly, you're making this personal. Min-jae's expression didn't change. It already is. That was the problem. They both knew it. Choi exhaled slowly. Then send her away, he said. Tonight. No complications. No loose ends. Min-jae looked past him, toward the corridor that led to the staff quarters. For a brief moment, something conflicted flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone. I'll handle it, he said. Elena was in the kitchen again. Not because she had to be. Because she didn't know where else to go. The routine grounded her. The familiar motions gave her something to hold on to. But her hands weren't as steady as before. Her thoughts kept circling back. To the attack. To the blood. To him. The sound of footsteps made her pause. She didn't turn immediately. She already knew. You're still working, Min-jae said from behind her. Elena let out a small breath. Someone has to. A beat. Then. You're leaving. The words were direct. Final. Elena turned this time. Am I? Yes. When? Tonight. Her jaw tightened slightly. And if I refuse? You won't. You don't know that. I do. Something in his tone made the air shift. Not anger. Not control. Something deeper. More dangerous. I can't protect you here anymore, he said. Elena held his gaze. And you think sending me away is protection? Yes. No, she said quietly. It's distance. That stopped him. You think distance keeps people safe, she continued. But all it does is make them easier to forget. I won't forget you. The words came out before he could stop them. And once they were there, they couldn't be taken back. Elena blinked. For the first time since she'd met him, she looked genuinely caught off guard. The silence stretched between them again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything neither of them had said until now. You don't get to decide this for me, she said finally, her voice softer but steady. I do, he replied. No, she shook her head. You want to. Another pause. Then quietly. Why? He frowned slightly. Why what? Why me? The question was simple, but it cut deeper than anything else. Min-jae looked at her, really looked at her, and for once, he didn't have a prepared answer. Because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't logical. It wasn't safe. He started, then stopped. Elena waited. He exhaled slowly. You're the only thing in this house that feels real. The words landed softly, but their impact was anything but. Elena's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Not fear, not surprise, understanding. And that was what made it dangerous. Outside, the house continued to move, to adjust, to recover. Inside the kitchen, everything had already changed. Elena didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, watching him, searching his face like she was trying to decide if what he said was real, or just another form of control dressed as honesty. The only thing that feels real, she repeated quietly. Min-jae didn't look away. Yes. A long silence followed, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Elena exhaled slowly, folding her arms. That's not a good reason, she said. His brows drew together slightly. It's the truth. It's not enough. That caught him off guard. Most people didn't challenge him. Not like this. Not this directly. Not without hesitation. But she didn't raise her voice. Didn't step back. She just stood her ground. If I leave, she continued, it won't be because you told me to. And if I stay, it won't be because you decided it. Min-jae studied her carefully. You think you have that kind of choice here? Elena met his gaze without flinching. I think if I don't, then this conversation doesn't matter. That landed. Hard. Because she wasn't wrong. And for a man who controlled everything, every outcome, every movement, every decision, that kind of uncertainty was unfamiliar. Dangerous. But also strangely grounding. Before he could respond, a knock came at the door. Sharp. Controlled. Then it opened without waiting for permission. Director Choi stepped in. His eyes immediately moved between them, taking in the distance, the tension, the unspoken shift in the room. So, Choi said calmly, this is where you've been. Min-jae's expression hardened again, the moment from seconds ago slipping back behind control. What do you want? Choi's gaze shifted briefly to Elena. I came to confirm that the situation has been handled. It has. And the girl? Min-jae didn't answer right away. That silence said more than words. Choi stepped further into the room. Elena Park, he said, addressing her directly for the first time. Her posture straightened slightly. Yes. You've seen things tonight that most people don't survive seeing, he said. That puts you in a very delicate position. Elena didn't respond. Choi smiled faintly. Ordinarily, this would be simple. Min-jae's voice cut in, cold and sharp. It's not simple. Choi didn't look at him. It is, he said. Unless you choose to complicate it. Now he turned. Their eyes locked. The tension in the room spiked instantly. You're overstepping, Min-jae said. No, Choi replied calmly. I'm maintaining order. Elena's gaze moved between them. She could feel it now. This wasn't just about her. This was about power, control, and something far more unstable beneath it. Choi stepped closer to her. You have two options, he said plainly. You leave tonight, under protection, and forget everything you've seen, or... She's not going anywhere, Min-jae said. Choi finally turned fully toward him. That's not your decision alone. It is. No, Choi said quietly. It isn't. The room went still. The kind of stillness that came right before something broke. Elena felt it. The shift. The line being drawn. And suddenly, this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about where she stood. She stepped forward. Both men turned to her. I'll decide, she said. That alone was enough to disrupt everything. Choi's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Min-jae watched her closely. You don't understand what you're stepping into, Choi said. No, Elena replied calmly. But I understand what I'm stepping away from. And what is that? She looked at him directly. Being treated like I don't have a voice. Silence. Then, she turned to Min-jae. If I stay, she said, it's not because you're protecting me. His jaw tightened slightly. Then why? Because I'm choosing to. Another pause. Then more quietly. And if I leave, it's because I decided that too. The air in the room shifted again. This time, everything changed. Choi exhaled slowly, shaking his head just slightly. This is exactly why attachments are dangerous, he said. Min-jae didn't respond. He was watching Elena, waiting for her choice. The weight of it settled fully now. Not just for her, but for him, for the entire house, for everything. Elena took a slow breath. Then, she made her decision. I'm not leaving. The words were quiet, but absolute. Choi closed his eyes briefly. Then you're choosing to become part of this, he said. Fully. There's no halfway. Elena nodded. I know. You don't, he replied. I do, she said. Enough. A long silence followed. Then Choi turned to Min-jae. Then make it official, he said. Or this becomes a liability we can't contain. Min-jae's expression darkened slightly. But he didn't argue. Because he knew. Choi was right. And that was the problem. Minutes later, the entire household had been gathered. The main hall, still carrying the faint aftermath of the attack, filled quickly with men in dark suits, their expressions controlled but alert. Whispers moved through the room. Confusion, curiosity, tension. Elena stood near the front, alone, but not uncertain. Min-jae entered last. The room fell silent instantly. Every eye turned to him. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate. His presence alone was enough to command attention. When he reached the center, he stopped. Then, he spoke. There was an attack tonight, he said. You all know that. No one responded. No one needed to. It failed. A quiet ripple of acknowledgement moved through the room. But it exposed something, he continued. A weakness. Now, the tension sharpened. This house is only as strong as what we protect, he said. His gaze shifted to Elena. And in that moment, everyone followed it. The whispers grew louder. Confused, disbelieving, curious. Min-jae reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Old, heavy, marked. The room went completely still. Even Choi didn't move. Elena's breath caught slightly. She hadn't expected this. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. Min-jae stepped toward her. Slowly, deliberately. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but carried through the entire hall. If you stay, he said, looking directly at her, this is what it means. No force. No command. Just truth. Elena looked at the ring. Then at him. Then at the room full of men watching every second. She understood now. This wasn't just protection. This was binding. Permanent. Dangerous. Irreversible. Her heart pounded, but her expression didn't waver. Slowly, she extended her hand. Not hesitantly. Not fearfully. Deliberately. A choice. Min-jae watched her for a second longer. Then, he placed the ring on her finger. The reaction was immediate. Shock. Whispers. Tension exploding through the room. Min-jae didn't look away from her. From this moment, he said, his voice firm again, she is not staff. Silence. She is under my name. That carried weight, more than most in the room were comfortable with. Choi's expression darkened slightly, but he said nothing. Because now, it was done. Elena looked at the ring, then back at Min-jae, and quietly, so only he could hear, then don't make me regret it. His gaze held hers, and for the first time, there was no distance between them, The house fell silent again. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't controlled. It was unstable. No one spoke for several seconds after the ring settled on Elena's finger. The silence wasn't obedience this time. It was shock. The kind that spreads slowly, crawling through a room as people try to understand what they just witnessed. A maid, standing at the center of the hall, wearing that ring. Min-jae's ring. Elena could feel every gaze on her, sharp and questioning. Some filled with disbelief, others with quiet resentment. A few with something darker. She didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on him. Because right now, he was the only one who mattered in this moment. Min-jae turned slightly, addressing the room again. If anyone has concerns, he said calmly, you can bring them to me. No one moved. No one dared. But the tension didn't disappear. It settled. Deep. Lingering beneath the surface like something waiting. Director Choi finally stepped forward. Not confrontational. But not passive either. You've made your position clear, he said. Min-jae didn't respond. Choi's gaze shifted briefly to Elena's hand, the ring catching the light. Then back to Min-jae. This will have consequences. It already does, Min-jae replied. A beat passed. Choi gave a small nod. Then stepped back. The message was understood. For now, he wouldn't challenge it. But this wasn't over. Not even close. The hall slowly began to clear. Quiet conversations. Measured steps. Controlled exits. But the atmosphere remained tense. Different. Elena stood still, her hand slightly raised, her eyes fixed on the ring like she was still processing what had just happened. It felt heavier than she expected. Not physically, but in meaning. You can still take it off. His voice came from beside her. She looked up. Min-jae was watching her again, but this time, not from a distance. Close. Present. Real. Elena let out a quiet breath. And what happens if I do? Then I find another way to protect you. She tilted her head slightly. And if I don't? His answer came without hesitation. Then you stay. A pause. And everything changes. Elena glanced back at the now nearly empty hall. It already has, she said softly. Min-jae followed her gaze. Yes, he agreed. It has. Later that night, the mansion settled into a strange quiet. Not the controlled silence from before. This one felt aware. Like the house itself was adjusting. Reacting. Elena stood alone in the kitchen again. The same place. The same hour. But nothing about it felt the same. Her fingers traced the edge of the counter absently. Then slowly, she looked down at her hand. At the ring. It gleamed under the soft light. A symbol. A decision. A risk. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn this time. You always come back here, Min-jae said. Her lips curved slightly. It's the only place that makes sense. He stepped beside her, closer than he had ever stood before without distance or formality between them. And now, he asked, does it still? Elena thought about it, then shook her head slightly. No, she admitted. Now it feels different. How? She turned to him. Like I don't know where I stand anymore. He held her gaze. You stand where you chose to. She studied him carefully. And where is that? There was no hesitation in his answer. Next to me. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything else he had said. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then don't treat me like something fragile, she said. His brow furrowed slightly. I'm not. You are, she cut in gently. You think this protects me from everything. It doesn't. Silence. You can't shield me from your world, she continued. Not anymore. Min-jae exhaled slowly. I know. Do you? His gaze didn't waver. I'm learning. That mattered more than she expected. Elena nodded slightly. Good. A quiet moment passed between them. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just real. Then, you should get some rest, she said. He almost smiled. You said that before. And you didn't listen. And now, she glanced at the bandage at his side. Now I'm saying it again. This time he did smile. Faint, but unmistakable. I will, he said. He turned to leave, then paused. Elena! She looked up. Yes. Another brief silence, as if he was choosing his words carefully. Don't regret it, he said. Her expression softened slightly. Then give me a reason not to. For a second, something deeper passed between them. Unspoken, but understood. Then he left. Days passed. The house adjusted, but the tension never fully disappeared. Eyes followed Elena now. Whispers stopped when she entered rooms. Doors opened faster. Conversations ended sooner. She wasn't invisible anymore. And that came with a cost. Director Choi watched everything. He said nothing, but he didn't need to. One evening, he approached Min-jae again. She's adapting, Choi said. Min-jae didn't look up. She has to. Choi studied him. And you. A pause. Then, I don't have that luxury. Choi gave a faint nod. No, he said. You don't. But there was something different now. Something Choi couldn't ignore. Min-jae wasn't just protecting her. He was changing. And that was far more dangerous than any outside threat. Late one night, Elena returned to the kitchen. Out of habit. Out of memory. She turned on the faucet, letting the water run for a moment. Then stopped. She didn't need to wash anything. She just stood there, listening. The silence had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't suffocating. It was uncertain. Alive. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. I thought you'd be here, Min-jae said. She smiled faintly. Of course you did. He stepped beside her again. No distance. No barriers. Just presence. For a while, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because now, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was shared. And just like that, everything had changed. Not because of the attack. Not because of the power. But because of a choice. A quiet one. Made in the middle of chaos. That refused to stay silent. If you made it this far, you already know this wasn't just a story about power. It was about choice, risk, and what happens when two completely different worlds collide. Would you have made the same decision Elena did? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, full of tension, emotion, and unexpected twists, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.